The soft afternoon light streamed through the tall windows of Westfield Academy of Music, catching dust particles that danced in the air like tiny fireflies. The hallways had finally emptied of students, their hurried footsteps and excited chatter replaced by a peaceful silence that settled over the building like a comfortable blanket. Eleanor Wright gathered her sheet music and lesson plans, tucking them neatly into her leather portfolio. At 58, she carried herself with the poise of someone who had spent decades perfecting her posture at the piano bench. Her salt and pepper hair was pulled back in a tight bun, not a strand out of place, much like the organized way she approached her teaching and her life. As the head piano instructor at Westfield for over 20 years, Eleanor had earned her reputation through dedication and unwavering standards. Her students won competitions, went on to prestigious conservatories, and sometimes returned to thank her for the discipline she had instilled in them. She wasn't known for warmth or patience with mediocrity, but her results spoke for themselves. "Good night, Mrs. Blackwood," Eleanor called to the department secretary as she passed the main office. "Don't forget we need those programs printed for next week's faculty showcase." "Already at the printers," the older woman responded with a knowing smile. "They'll be ready tomorrow afternoon." Eleanor nodded approvingly. She appreciated efficiency almost as much as musical excellence. Making her way down the corridor toward the exit, she suddenly paused. A sound caught her ear, piano notes hesitant at first, then flowing more confidently. Someone was playing in the main recital hall, which should have been locked at this hour. Her first thought was irritation. The Steinway Grand in that room was reserved exclusively for performances and master classes. Even faculty needed permission to use it outside scheduled events. Eleanor changed direction, her low heels clicking purposefully against the polished floor as she headed toward the source of the music. The piece was Debussy's Clair de Lune, one of the most frequently butchered compositions in her experience. Yet something about this rendition made her slow her pace as she approached the recital hall doors. There was a delicacy to the playing, a sensitivity in the phrasing that suggested genuine understanding of the piece rather than mere technical reproduction. Eleanor quietly opened one of the heavy wooden doors and slipped inside. The large room with its rows of empty seats was dimly lit, with only the stage lights creating a golden pool around the magnificent black Steinway. Seated at the piano was a young woman Eleanor didn't recognize as one of the students or faculty. She wore a gray uniform, the cleaning staff uniform, and her long dark hair was tied back in a simple ponytail. Her eyes were closed as her fingers moved across the keys with surprising grace, drawing out the haunting melody with such feeling that Eleanor found herself momentarily transfixed. The spell broke when the janitor hit a wrong note, winced visibly, and then continued. That small error snapped Eleanor back to her senses. This was the school's prized instrument, not a practice room piano meant for beginners. "Excuse me?" Eleanor called out sharply, her voice echoing in the large space. "What do you think you're doing?" The young woman's hands jerked away from the keys as if burned, her eyes flying open in alarm. She stood up so quickly that the bench scraped loudly against the wooden stage floor. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, taking a step back from the piano. "I didn't think anyone was still here." Eleanor marched down the center aisle, her displeasure evident in every step. As she got closer, she could see the name tag on the young woman's uniform, Mia Chen. "That doesn't answer my question," Eleanor said coldly. "Do you have permission to use this piano?" Mia's face flushed. "No, ma'am. This is a $150,000 instrument," Eleanor interrupted, reaching the stage now. "Not a toy for the cleaning staff to play with when they should be working." The words came out harsher than Eleanor had intended, but the thought of unauthorized hands on the Steinway genuinely disturbed her. This piano was tuned weakly, its humidity carefully controlled, its keys cleaned only with specialized products. "I finished my work in this section," Mia explained quietly, her eyes downcast. "I always make sure everything is done properly before I—" Her voice trailed off. "Before you what?" "Decide to entertain yourself with equipment you're only supposed to dust?" Eleanor climbed the 3 steps to the stage, approaching the piano protectively. She examined the glossy surface for any smudges or damage. "I would never damage it," Mia said, a hint of hurt pride entering her voice. "I understand how precious it is." Eleanor gave her a skeptical look. "Do you? This piano has been played by world-renowned musicians. It requires special care and handling. People study for years before they're allowed to perform on this stage. Mia's shoulders slumped slightly, but there was something in her posture that wasn't completely defeated. I know, I wasn't trying to— How long have you worked here? Eleanor asked, cutting her off again. 2 weeks, Mia replied. Well, Miss Chen, let me make something clear. At Westfield, we have rules about who can access certain equipment. The instruments in practice rooms are for students. The instruments in performance spaces are for scheduled events and approved performers only. Eleanor closed the fallboard over the keys with a deliberate motion. This isn't a place for hobbyists or amateurs to play around. A flicker of something, perhaps anger, perhaps hurt, passed across Mia's face before her expression became carefully neutral again. I understand. I should hope so. Eleanor stepped back, taking in the young woman's appearance more fully. She was probably in her late 20s, with delicate features and hands that Eleanor now noticed were indeed a pianist's hands, long-fingered and strong. For a moment, Eleanor felt a twinge of curiosity about her background, but she pushed it aside. You should stick to what you were hired for, she said firmly. The custodial staff does important work keeping this school running, but there are boundaries that need to be respected. Mia nodded silently, her gaze now fixed somewhere over Eleanor's shoulder, as if looking directly at the older woman had become too difficult. I won't touch it again, she said finally, her voice quiet but clear. I apologize for overstepping. Eleanor felt a small, uncomfortable sensation in her chest, something like doubt. The young woman had played beautifully after all. But rules were rules, and making exceptions led to chaos. In her experience, maintaining high standards meant being firm, even when it wasn't pleasant. See that you don't, Eleanor replied. Now, if you've finished cleaning this area, perhaps you should move on to your next assignment. Mia nodded again and gathered her cleaning cart from where it stood near the side exit. As she pushed it toward the door, Eleanor noticed a small book peeking out from the supply caddy, a worn copy of sheet music. She couldn't read the title from this distance, but the sight of it gave her another moment's pause. Ms. Chen, she called. Not entirely sure why she was prolonging the interaction, Mia turned, her expression guarded. Yes? Eleanor hesitated, then simply said, Make sure you lock up properly when you leave this room. Of course, Mia replied, then pushed her cart through the door and was gone. Left alone in the recital hall, Eleanor found herself walking back to the piano bench and sitting down. She opened the fallboard again, placing her fingers lightly on the keys where Mia's had been minutes before. The memory of the music lingered in the room, that surprisingly sensitive interpretation of Debussy. For a brief moment, Eleanor wondered about the story behind those skilled hands pushing a cleaning cart. Then she firmly closed the piano again, gathered her things, and walked out of the recital hall, making sure the door locked behind her. As she drove home that evening, Eleanor tried to dismiss the encounter from her mind. She had a faculty meeting in the morning, 3 advanced students to prepare for upcoming auditions, and a difficult piece by Prokofiev to practice for her own performance at next week's showcase. She had no time to worry about a janitor who didn't respect boundaries, yet as she pulled into her driveway, the haunting notes of Claire de Lune still echoed in her thoughts, along with the image of Mia Chen's face when Eleanor had told her to stick to mopping. There had been something in her eyes, not just embarrassment or resentment, but a deep sadness that seemed to go beyond their brief encounter. Eleanor shook her head as if to clear it. She had done the right thing. The school had standards and procedures for a reason. If everyone just did as they pleased, what would be the point of all the structure and discipline that made Westfield exceptional? Still, as she prepared for bed that night, Eleanor found herself remembering her own early days as a pianist, the hunger to play, to express, to connect with the music. Had she been too harsh? Perhaps. But maintaining excellence sometimes required firmness. Tomorrow would be another busy day of shaping young talents and upholding the traditions that had made her career meaningful. The janitor would stick to cleaning as she should, and Eleanor would continue molding the next generation of pianists, as she had for decades. Yet somehow, she knew their paths would cross again. And next time she might listen a little longer before speaking. The next morning dawned gray and rainy, matching Mia's mood as she unlocked the service entrance to Westfield Academy of Music. She arrived an hour earlier than required. a habit formed from years of making the most of quiet moments. Today, though, the solitude felt less like a gift and more like a reminder of her place in this world of polished wood and perfect acoustics. She wheeled her cleaning cart through the empty corridors, the squeak of one stubborn wheel echoing against the walls. The encounter with Ms. Wright yesterday still stung, not because the piano teacher had been wrong about the rules, but because of how easily she had dismissed Mia as nothing more than hands meant for scrubbing floors. Stick to what you were hired for. The words replayed in Mia's mind as she began wiping down the glass display cases that housed trophies and photographs of famous alumni. Her reflection stared back at her, ghostly in the dim morning light. 10 years ago, Mia would never have imagined this would be her life. Back in Shanghai, she had been the one whose photographs hung in display cases. The talented girl from the provincial town who had won regional competitions and earned a spot at the prestigious Shanghai Conservatory. Music had been her future, her identity, her voice. Then her father had fallen ill and her mother had struggled to keep their small grocery store running. Mia's younger brother and sister still needed school fees. The choice hadn't really been a choice at all. Family came first. She had left the conservatory, sold her piano, and used the money to help pay for her father's treatments. When the opportunity came to move to America with her aunt and uncle, Mia had seized it, hoping for a fresh start. She took whatever job she could find, sending half her earnings back home each month. Her siblings were in college now, her brother studying engineering, her sister pursuing nursing. Their success was worth every sacrifice, but the music inside her refused to die. It kept bubbling up, seeking outlets. Sometimes she would tap melodies on countertops or practice finger exercises while riding the bus. And sometimes, when she thought no one was listening, she would find a piano and let herself remember who she had once been. Now, as she cleaned the faculty lounge, Mia resolved to be more careful. This job paid better than her previous position at the hotel, and the hours allowed her to take online classes in business administration. She couldn't risk losing it because she couldn't keep her hands off a piano. "Good morning," came a cheerful voice from the doorway. Mia looked up to see an elderly man with kind eyes and a bow tie entering the room. She recognized him as Dr. Thomas Liu, who taught music theory and composition. Unlike some of the other faculty who barely acknowledged the cleaning staff, Dr. Liu always greeted everyone by name. "Good morning, Dr. Liu," she replied, forcing a small smile. "You're here early again, Mia," he said, heading for the coffee machine. "Always the first to arrive and the last to leave. The dedication is admirable, but don't work too hard." She appreciated his friendliness, but felt awkward after yesterday's scolding. "Just trying to do my job well," she said quietly. "Speaking of jobs," Dr. Liu said as he waited for his coffee to brew, "I've been meaning to ask if you might be interested in some additional hours. My wife runs a community music program for children on Saturday mornings, and their regular custodian is taking leave for knee surgery. It would be just a few hours each weekend, but the pay is decent." Mia's heart lifted slightly at the prospect of extra income. "I would be very interested, thank you." "Wonderful. I'll have her call you." He took a sip of his coffee and smiled warmly. "She'll be pleased. She's always saying we need more reliable help." After Dr. Liu left, Mia finished cleaning the lounge and moved on to the practice rooms. She worked efficiently, trying not to listen too closely to the students who began arriving, carrying instrument cases and chattering excitedly about upcoming performances. Their world seemed so far from hers now, though she had once belonged to it. By mid-morning, she had reached the east wing where the individual practice rooms were located. Most were occupied, snippets of scales and arpeggios leaking through the supposedly soundproof doors. Mia knocked on each empty room before entering to clean, careful not to disturb anyone's practice time. As she approached the last room in the hallway, she heard frustrated sounds coming from inside, someone repeatedly playing the same passage, making the same mistake, then sighing heavily. Mia hesitated, not wanting to interrupt, but needing to finish her assigned areas before lunch break. She knocked gently. "Custodial services," she called. The music stopped and a young voice answered, "Come in." Mia opened the door to find a boy of about 12 sitting at the upright piano, sheet music spread before him. His expression was one of pure defeat. "I can come back later," Mia offered, seeing his frustration. No, it's okay, he said, gathering his music. I give up anyway. I'm never going to get this right, and my lesson with Ms. Wright is tomorrow. He said the name with such trepidation that Mia immediately felt a kinship with him. What piece are you working on? She asked, despite her resolution to keep her distance from anything piano-related. He showed her the music, a Bach invention that Mia remembered well from her own studies. I keep messing up this part, he said, pointing to a tricky section where the left and right-hand parts crossed over each other. Ms. Wright says my hands are too sloppy, and my timing is terrible, he added glumly. My mom spent a lot of money on these lessons, and I'm just disappointing everyone. Mia glanced at the door, then back at the boy's downcast face. Against her better judgment, she set down her cleaning supplies. What's your name? She asked. Lee, he replied. Lee Alvarez. I'm Mia, she said. Would you like a small tip, Lee? Something that might help with that section? His face brightened slightly. You play? She nodded but didn't elaborate. The trick with this passage is to think of it as a conversation between your hands, not a race. May I? She gestured toward the piano. Lee slid over on the bench and Mia sat beside him, careful not to touch the keys yet. Watch first, she said, hovering her hands above the keyboard. See how the left hand asks a question? She mimed playing the first few notes, and then the right hand answers. Her right hand moved in response. When the parts cross, it's like they're reaching toward each other to shake hands, she continued. If you think of it that way, the timing starts to make more sense. Lee looked intrigued. Can you show me? Mia hesitated, remembering Ms. Wright's warning. But this was just a practice room piano, not the precious Steinway in the recital hall. And she was trying to help a student, not indulging herself. Just once, she said, and played the passage slowly, articulating each note with precision while maintaining the rhythmic flow. The familiar feel of the keys beneath her fingers sent a bittersweet pang through her chest. Wow, Lee said when she finished. That sounded so much better than when I do it. You'll get there, Mia encouraged him. Try thinking about the conversation between your hands, not just the notes on the page. As Lee attempted the passage again, Mia gave gentle pointers about hand position and wrist tension. After a few tries, he played through the section without mistakes. I did it, he exclaimed, looking up at her with newfound respect. Are you a teacher here too? No, Mia said quickly, standing up and returning to her cart. I'm just the janitor. But I used to play a long time ago. You should be teaching, Lee said with the honest directness of youth. You explained it way better than... He stopped himself, perhaps remembering that it wasn't wise to criticize Ms. Wright out loud. Mia smiled sadly. Thank you, but my path went in a different direction. I should let you get back to practicing, and I need to finish cleaning. As she prepared to leave, Lee asked, Will you be here tomorrow? Maybe you could help me with another part that's giving me trouble. The hopefulness in his eyes made refusal difficult. I clean this wing every day, but Lee, I'm not a teacher here. If Ms. Wright found out I was interfering with her students' practice, I won't tell, Lee promised. Please, just for a few minutes. Against her better judgment, Mia nodded. A few minutes only, and this stays between us. Throughout the rest of the day, Mia found her thoughts returning to that brief moment at the piano. How natural it had felt, how right. The muscle memory was still there. The understanding of the music, the joy of sharing knowledge. For those few minutes, she had been Mia the pianist again, not Mia the janitor. As evening approached and she prepared to head home to the small apartment she shared with her aunt, uncle, and cousin, Mia made a decision. She might have to stick to mopping floors at Westfield to pay her bills, but she wouldn't let anyone, not even the intimidating Ms. Wright, make her feel ashamed of her love for music. The next day, true to her word, she spent a few minutes helping Lee with his Bach invention. The day after that, he brought a friend who was struggling with a Clementi sonatina. By the end of the week, Mia had a small group of students who would seek her out during practice breaks or after school, asking for tips or demonstrations. She was careful to keep these interactions brief and discreet, always mindful of her primary duties. But for the first time since arriving in America, Mia felt something close to fulfillment. She was still cleaning, still sending money home, still taking her online classes, but she was also connecting with music again, in a small but meaningful way. What she didn't know was that her secret teaching sessions wouldn't remain secret for long. And when Eleanor Wright discovered what was happening in those practice rooms during breaks and after hours, the confrontation would force both women to reconsider everything they thought they knew about music, worth, and second chances. 3 weeks passed, and autumn settled more deeply over the city. The trees surrounding Westfield Academy turned brilliant shades of red and gold, and the hallways grew busier as students prepared for the fall recital season. Eleanor Wright's schedule had become increasingly hectic, with longer teaching hours and additional administrative duties as the department head. Tonight, she had stayed later than usual, working with an advanced student who was preparing for a prestigious competition. By the time she finished, most of the faculty and staff had already left for the day. As she walked down the main corridor, adjusting her scarf against the evening chill, Eleanor noticed something odd. Several practice room lights were still on, even though student hours had ended an hour ago. Frowning, she headed toward the east wing to investigate. As she drew closer, she heard a piano playing. Not scales or exercises, but a Chopin nocturne, beautifully rendered with a depth of feeling that made her pause mid-step. The piece was one she knew well, having taught it countless times, but there was something distinctive about this interpretation. The pianist took subtle liberties with the tempo, creating moments of tension and release that spoke of personal connection rather than technical showmanship. Eleanor moved quietly toward the sound, curious about which student would be practicing so late and playing at such an advanced level. As she reached practice room 7, she peered through the small window in the door and froze in surprise. Seated at the piano was Mia Chen, the janitor she had reprimanded weeks ago. But she wasn't alone. 5 students sat cross-legged on the floor around the piano, listening with rapt attention as Mia demonstrated a particularly challenging passage. "You see," Mia was saying, "Chopin writes these complex emotional landscapes. It's not enough to play the notes correctly. You have to understand what he's trying to say." Her hands moved expressively as she spoke. Listen to how this phrase builds, like someone gathering courage to speak a difficult truth. She played again, and Eleanor watched in astonishment as the students nodded in understanding. Among them was Lee Alvarez, one of her own pupils who had recently shown remarkable improvement. Now she understood why. Eleanor's first instinct was indignation. This woman was overstepping boundaries again, interfering with her students' instruction. But something held her back from immediately bursting into the room. Perhaps it was the genuine engagement on the students' faces, or the undeniable skill in Mia's playing. Instead, Eleanor stepped back from the door and continued to listen. "The pedal markings are guidelines, not rules," Mia was explaining. "You need to adjust based on the unique voice of each piano and the acoustics of the room. Let me show you." She demonstrated different pedaling techniques, illustrating how each affected the sound. Her explanations were clear and accessible, free from the complex terminology that sometimes confused younger students. Eleanor found herself mentally taking notes on Mia's teaching approach. It was refreshingly practical while remaining musically sophisticated. For nearly 20 minutes, Eleanor stood in the hallway observing this impromptu masterclass. She saw Lee attempt the passage himself, with Mia offering gentle corrections to his hand position. She watched another student, Tanya Rossi, overcome a technical hurdle she'd been struggling with for months in Eleanor's own lessons. Finally, Mia glanced at her watch and said, "That's all for today. I need to finish my work and you all should be heading home." "But we're making such progress," protested one of the boys. "Can't we stay a little longer?" Mia shook her head firmly. "Your parents will be waiting and I have responsibilities to finish." "Same time on Thursday?" The students nodded eagerly, gathering their belongings. Eleanor quickly retreated around the corner, not wanting to be discovered eavesdropping. She heard the practice room door open and the sound of the students thanking Mia as they left. Once their footsteps had faded, Eleanor peered around the corner again. Mia remained in the practice room alone. Instead of leaving to resume her cleaning duties, she turned back to the piano, her fingers hovering over the keys for a moment before beginning to play. This time it wasn't a teaching demonstration but a personal performance. Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, one of the most technically demanding pieces in the standard repertoire. Eleanor watched in growing amazement as Mia's hands flew across the keyboard with precision and confidence. There was no hesitation, no amateur fumbling. This was the playing of someone with years of serious training and natural talent, passionate, technically accomplished and deeply musical. As the final chords resonated in the small room, Eleanor saw something that surprised her even more. Tears on Mia's cheeks, illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lighting. The janitor sat motionless for a moment, then wiped her face with the back of her hand and gently closed the piano lid. The glimpse of raw emotion made Eleanor feel like an intruder in a private moment. She retreated silently down the hall, her mind racing. Who was this woman, really? What circumstances had led someone with such obvious talent and training to be pushing a mop instead of performing on stage? And why did Eleanor feel so unsettled by the discovery? Back in her office, Eleanor sat at her desk without turning on the lights, staring out the window at the darkening sky. She had always prided herself on being an excellent judge of musical potential, on knowing within minutes whether a student had what it took to succeed. Yet she had completely misjudged Mia Chen, dismissing her based on her job title without recognizing the artist behind the uniform. The next day, Eleanor found herself watching for Mia in the hallways. She spotted her in the afternoon, efficiently cleaning the trophy cases in the main foyer, looking nothing like the passionate musician from the night before. Eleanor approached, clearing her throat to get Mia's attention. "Ms. Chen," she said, trying to keep her tone neutral. Mia looked up, a flash of wariness crossing her face. "Yes, Ms. Wright? I'd like to speak with you when you have a moment." Mia's expression grew guarded.
Have I done something wrong?
Eleanor chose her words carefully. "I was in the building late last night and happened to overhear music coming from one of the practice rooms." The color drained from Mia's face. "I see," she said quietly. "I can explain." "I'd rather you didn't explain here," Eleanor replied, glancing around at the students passing through the foyer. "Would you be available after your shift ends today?" "We could talk in my office," Mia nodded, her posture tense. "I finish at 7. I'll see you then," Eleanor said, then added, "This isn't necessarily a disciplinary conversation. Ms. Chen, I just have some questions." A slight frown creased Mia's brow, as if she didn't quite believe this reassurance, but she nodded again and returned to her work. Throughout the day, Eleanor found herself distracted during lessons, her thoughts repeatedly returning to what she had witnessed the night before. She had to remind herself to focus on the students in front of her, though she did pay particular attention to Lee during his lesson, noting the improvements in his Bach invention. When she complimented his progress, he looked simultaneously pleased and guilty. By 7 o'clock, Eleanor had dismissed her last student and prepared her office for the meeting with Mia. She had pulled some files from the school archives and made a few phone calls, following a hunch that had been forming since the previous evening. A knock came at precisely 7:05, and Eleanor called, "Come in." Mia entered, still in her work uniform but with her hair freshly tidied and her expression composed. Despite her apparent calm, Eleanor noticed her hands were tightly clasped, the hands of a pianist protecting her most valuable tools. "Please, sit down," Eleanor said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Mia sat, her posture perfect, another sign of her musical training. For a moment, neither woman spoke. "You play beautifully," Eleanor finally said, deciding directness was the best approach. Mia's eyes widened slightly, but she remained silent. "The Rachmaninoff was particularly impressive," Eleanor continued. "Not many pianists can handle those technical demands while maintaining such musical sensitivity." "Thank you," Mia said softly, clearly surprised by the direction of the conversation. "I also observed part of your teaching session," Eleanor added. "You have a gift for explanation. Lee Alvarez has shown remarkable improvement recently. Now I understand why." Mia straightened in her chair. "I never meant to undermine your teaching, Ms. Wright. The students asked for help and I—" Eleanor held up a hand. "I'm not angry, Ms. Chen. I'm curious. You clearly have conservatory-level training. How did you end up working as a janitor at Westfield?" The question hung in the air between them. Mia looked down at her hands, then back up at Eleanor, as if deciding how much to reveal. "Life doesn't always follow the path we plan," she said finally. "I studied at the Shanghai Conservatory for 2 years before family circumstances forced me to leave. That was 10 years ago. And you haven't played professionally since then?" "No," Mia replied. "I've barely played at all until recently. There was no room for a piano in my life anymore." Eleanor leaned forward, intrigued by the hint of a story. "Yet you still play at a professional level?" That kind of ability doesn't maintain itself without practice. A small, sad smile touched Mia's lips. Music doesn't leave you even when you leave it. I practice in my head on the bus. I play on countertops and tables. And yes, sometimes when I think no one is listening, I find a real piano and remember who I used to be. There was something in her voice, a mixture of pride and resignation, that struck Eleanor deeply. She recognized in Mia the same consuming passion for music that had driven her own life, but with a humility that Eleanor rarely encountered in talented musicians. "Ms. Chen Mia," Eleanor said, her voice gentler than before, "I believe I've made a serious misjudgment, and I think it's time we had an honest conversation about your future at Westfield." Mia's hands tensed in her lap. She had expected a reprimand, perhaps even termination for using the school's pianos without permission and interfering with students' education. Eleanor Wright's words about having an honest conversation about her future could mean anything. "I'm not sure I understand," Mia said carefully. Eleanor opened a folder on her desk. "Before our meeting, I did some research. The Shanghai Conservatory only accepts the most gifted students in China. Your name seemed familiar, so I made a few calls." She looked up from the papers. "You won the Eastern Regional Young Artist Competition at 17. You were selected for a special performance at the Shanghai Spring International Music Festival the following year." Mia's eyes widened slightly. "You went to a lot of trouble." "I'm thorough when something interests me," Eleanor replied. "What I can't find is why you left the conservatory after 2 years when all records suggest you were on track for a significant career." The room fell quiet except for the ticking of the old clock on Eleanor's wall. Outside, the security lights came on as darkness fell completely. "My father became ill," Mia finally said, her voice steady despite the painful memories. "Brain cancer. My mother couldn't manage alone with 2 younger children still in school. The treatments were expensive and there was the family store to run." She shrugged slightly. It wasn't really a choice. "You gave up your musical career for your family," Eleanor said. "It wasn't a question. I did what anyone would do," Mia replied. "My brother and sister are both in college now. My father lived 3 more years because of those treatments. Music had to wait." Eleanor leaned back in her chair, studying Mia with new eyes. "And now? Your father has passed?" Mia nodded. 4 years ago. My mother runs the store with help from my uncle. I send money home each month to help with my siblings' education. And your own dreams? Have you abandoned them completely?" The directness of the question caught Mia off guard. For years, she had pushed thoughts of her former ambitions aside, focusing instead on practical needs and immediate responsibilities. Dreams were luxuries she couldn't afford. "I take online business classes," she said. "Someday I hope to open a small music store, perhaps offer basic piano lessons to beginners. It's not the concert stage, but it would be a life connected to music." Eleanor tapped her fingers on the desk, a pianist's habit when thinking. "And in the meantime, you clean floors, dust pianos you're not supposed to play, and secretly teach students who aren't yours." Mia felt a flicker of defensiveness. "I've never neglected my work duties. The teaching only happens during my breaks or after hours, and only when the students ask for help." "That's not criticism," Eleanor said, raising a hand. "It's observation. In fact, I find it rather remarkable that after being away from formal music education for so long, you still have so much to offer. Your advice to Lee about the Bach invention was exactly what he needed. I've been trying to get that point across to him for weeks." Confusion replaced Mia's defensiveness. This conversation was nothing like what she had expected. "Miss Wright, may I ask where this is leading? If you're going to ask me to stop helping the students, I understand. I never meant to overstep." Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "Actually, I was wondering if you might consider taking on more students, not fewer." Mia blinked in surprise. "I don't understand." "Westfield has been awarded a grant to expand our community outreach program," Eleanor explained, sliding a brochure across the desk. "Part of the funding is earmarked for a beginner piano program for underprivileged children in the neighborhood. We've been looking for the right instructor, someone patient, skilled, and able to connect with students who may have no prior musical background." Mia stared at the brochure, then back at Eleanor, trying to process the sudden shift in direction. "You're offering me a teaching position?" "Part-time to start," Eleanor clarified. Saturday mornings and 2 afternoons a week after regular school hours. The pay would be considerably better than your current position, though perhaps not enough to leave it entirely, at least not initially. Why? Mia asked, the single word encompassing multiple questions. Eleanor's expression turned thoughtful. In 30 years of teaching, I've learned to recognize not just technical ability, but the capacity to inspire. Last night I saw you do something remarkable. You made music come alive for those students in a way that transcended notes on a page. She paused. It reminded me of why I became a teacher in the first place, something I fear I've sometimes forgotten amid administrative duties and competition preparations. Mia sat very still, absorbing the unexpected words and the opportunity they presented. After a moment she asked, "What about my current position? The cleaning job?" "That would be between you and the facilities manager," Eleanor replied. "But I would suggest reducing your hours rather than leaving entirely until we see how the program develops. The community classes could grow if they're successful." Hope, a feeling Mia had carefully contained for years, began to unfurl inside her chest. She tried to keep her expression measured, professional. "I would need to think about this, check my schedule with my other commitments." "Of course," Eleanor said. "The program doesn't begin for 3 weeks. Take a few days to consider the offer." She hesitated, then added more personally, "For what it's worth, I think you would be excellent in this role." As Mia left the office, her mind was spinning with possibilities. Walking down the now quiet hallways toward the exit, she passed the recital hall where Eleanor had first reprimanded her. On impulse, she tried the door. It was unlocked. The room was dark except for the safety lights, creating a ghostly blue glow across the empty seats and the gleaming Steinway on stage. Mia stood in the doorway, remembering how humiliated she had felt that day, how firmly Eleanor had put her in her place. And now somehow everything had changed. The next morning, Eleanor arrived at school earlier than usual. She had slept poorly, her mind replaying her conversation with Mia and questioning her own motives. Was she trying to make amends for her hasty judgment? Or was she genuinely impressed by Mia's abilities? Perhaps both were true. She was surprised to find Dr. Liu already in the faculty lounge making coffee. "Early start today, Eleanor?" he asked warmly. "Preparation for the winter showcase," she replied, pouring herself a cup. "The programming needs to be finalized by next week." Dr. Liu nodded. "I meant to ask, have you found someone for the community outreach program yet? The grant committee is eager for updates." "Possibly," Eleanor said, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "I've offered the position to Mia Chen." Dr. Liu's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Our custodian?" "She was once a student at the Shanghai Conservatory," Eleanor explained. "Quite accomplished, actually. Life circumstances interrupted her education, but her abilities remain impressive." "Ah," Dr. Liu said, a knowing smile crossing his face. "So you finally discovered her secret?" Eleanor looked at him sharply. "You knew?" He shrugged. "I've heard her play a few times when she thought the building was empty. My wife and I came back late one evening to retrieve some forgotten papers, and there she was in one of the practice rooms playing Liszt as if her heart would break. We didn't interrupt, it seemed too private a moment." "Why didn't you say something?" Eleanor asked. "It wasn't my place," he replied simply. "But I did recommend her for that weekend position at my wife's community center. She's been helping with their children's music program for several weeks now. The kids adore her." Eleanor felt a twinge of irritation that Dr. Liu had kept this information from her, followed by embarrassment that she herself had failed to notice what was happening in her own school. She prided herself on her awareness of musical talent. How had she missed someone like Mia right under her nose? "She hasn't accepted the position yet," Eleanor said, bringing her thoughts back to the present. She wanted time to consider. "She'll accept," Dr. Liu said confidently. "Music isn't just what she does, it's who she is. You've offered her a way back to herself." Throughout the day, Eleanor found herself watching for Mia in the hallways, but their paths didn't cross. The custodian had been assigned to the West Wing, while Eleanor's lessons were concentrated in the East practice rooms. By afternoon, Eleanor began to wonder if Mia was deliberately avoiding her, perhaps still processing the unexpected offer. As the last students left for the day, Eleanor remained in her office catching up on paperwork. A gentle knock on her door pulled her attention away from the budget spreadsheets. "Come in," she called. Mia entered, no longer in her work uniform but dressed in simple dark pants and a blue blouse. The change in clothing transformed her bearing, making Eleanor see more clearly the conservatory student she had once been. "I've thought about your offer," Mia said without preamble. "And?" Eleanor prompted when Mia didn't immediately continue. "I'd like to accept, with one condition." Mia's voice was quiet but firm. Eleanor set down her pen. "What condition?" "I want to audition properly," Mia said. "Not as a favor or an act of charity. If I'm going to teach at Westfield, even in the community program, I want to know I earned the position on merit." Eleanor hadn't expected this response, but she found herself respecting it. "That's not necessary. I've heard you play through a practice room door," Mia interrupted gently. "Please, Ms. Wright, this is important to me." After a moment's consideration, Eleanor nodded. "All right, the recital hall is free now. Shall we?" Minutes later, they stood together on the stage where they had first met. The empty hall seemed to watch them expectantly as Eleanor gestured toward the Steinway. "What will you play?" she asked. Mia approached the piano with reverence, running her fingers lightly over the fallboard before opening it. "Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor," she said. "It was the last piece I performed publicly before leaving the conservatory." Eleanor nodded and took a seat in the front row. "Whenever you're ready." Mia sat at the bench, adjusted its height, and took a deep breath. Then her hands touched the keys, and the familiar opening notes of the ballad filled the hall. From the first phrase, Eleanor knew she was witnessing something special. Mia played with technical precision, yes, but more importantly, with a depth of emotional understanding that can't be taught. The piece tells a story, beginning with quiet reflection, building to moments of sweeping passion and ending in a brilliant, turbulent conclusion. In Mia's hands, every note had purpose, every phrase direction. As the final chords resonated through the hall, Eleanor remained silent, allowing the music to fade naturally into the perfect acoustics of the space. Mia sat motionless at the piano, her hands still poised above the keys, her eyes closed. After a long moment, Eleanor stood and walked back to the stage. "I believe," she said quietly, "that we can dispense with any further audition requirements." Mia looked up, a question in her eyes. "The position is yours," Eleanor continued. "And if you're willing, I'd like to discuss the possibility of a faculty recital appearance as well. It's time the Westfield community heard what music can truly sound like when played with both heart and understanding." A smile, the first genuine smile Eleanor had seen from her, transformed Mia's face. "I would be honored," she said, on both counts. As they walked together toward the exit, Eleanor found herself wondering how many other hidden talents she might have overlooked in her years of teaching, how many potential artists she might have dismissed because they didn't fit her preconceptions of what a musician should look like or where they should come from. "Ms. Wright," Mia said as they reached the door, interrupting Eleanor's thoughts. "May I ask what changed your mind about me?" Eleanor considered the question carefully. "I've spent my career focused on technical excellence and proper form, the mechanics of music," she said finally. "When I heard you play and teach, I was reminded that music isn't just about perfect technique. It's about communication, connection, humanity. You never lost sight of that, even when you lost everything else." Mia nodded thoughtfully. "My mother used to say that true music lives in the space between notes, not in the notes themselves." "Your mother is a wise woman," Eleanor replied. "Perhaps you could remind me of that from time to time. Teachers sometimes need teaching too." As they parted ways in the parking lot, Eleanor felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the pure excitement of discovery, of finding unexpected beauty in an overlooked place. Tomorrow would bring practical details to arrange, schedules to coordinate, programs to design, but tonight she carried with her the memory of Chopin's Ballade and the reminder that second chances sometimes come in the most unexpected forms. 6 months passed quickly. Winter gave way to spring, and the grounds of Westfield Academy bloomed with new life. Inside the school, another kind of blossoming was taking place. The community outreach program had started small, just 12 children from the surrounding neighborhood attending Saturday morning piano classes. Under Mia's guidance, the program had grown to include 30 students and expanded to include weekday afternoon sessions. A waiting list had formed, and the school board was discussing additional funding. On this particular Saturday morning, Eleanor found herself drawn to the classroom where Mia was teaching. She stood in the doorway, observing without interrupting. The room had been transformed from a formal classroom into a warm, inviting space with colorful posters about music theory and hand-drawn pictures from students decorating the walls. Mia sat at a piano at the front of the room, surrounded by 8 children between ages 7 and 11. They were playing a game that involved identifying intervals, the distances between notes, but Mia had turned it into a story about musical mountains and valleys that had the children giggling as they learned. "Okay, let's try a big mountain now," Mia said, playing 2 notes widely separated on the keyboard. "How many steps to climb this one?" A small girl with braids raised her hand excitedly. "That's an octave." 8 steps. "Excellent, Zoe." Mia beamed. "Now everyone, show me with your arms how big an octave feels." The children stretched their arms wide, laughing as they nearly bumped into each other. Eleanor smiled, remembering how she had once taught these same concepts with flashcards and memory drills. Mia's approach was different, playful, physical, and incredibly effective. The children were absorbing complex musical ideas without realizing they were learning. After the class ended and the children had been picked up by their parents, Mia noticed Eleanor in the doorway. "How long have you been standing there?" she asked, gathering sheet music from the piano. "Long enough to steal some teaching ideas," Eleanor replied with a small smile. "Your mountain and valley game is much better than my circle of fifths worksheet." Mia laughed. "Different approaches for different settings. I doubt your advanced students would appreciate pretending their arms are musical intervals." "Don't be too sure," Eleanor said. "Even virtuosos need to reconnect with the joy of music sometimes." She entered the room fully and sat in one of the small chairs. "The faculty meeting yesterday went well. I wanted to let you know personally that the board approved your proposal." Mia's eyes lit up. "For the summer camp program?" "That's wonderful news." Eleanor nodded. 2 weeks in July with full funding for 20 scholarship students. You'll have access to the recital hall and 3 classrooms. Dr. Liu has agreed to help with the choral component, and 2 of our string faculty will offer group lessons. "I can't believe it's really happening," Mia said, sitting down across from Eleanor. "When I first suggested it, I thought it was a long shot." "Your results speak for themselves," Eleanor replied. The parent testimonials were quite compelling. Mrs. Patel's comment about how her son finally stops fidgeting when he practices piano was particularly effective. With the board members, they shared a knowing smile. Mrs. Patel's son, Raj, had been diagnosed with attention difficulties and had struggled in traditional classroom settings. Under Mia's guidance, he had found focus through music in a way that had surprised everyone, including his doctors. "There's something else," Eleanor continued. "The scholarship committee met this morning. They've approved a special fund to support your continued education." Mia looked up, confusion crossing her face. "My education?" "If you choose to complete your degree," Eleanor explained. "The committee feels, and I agree, that your talent and teaching abilities warrant formal credentials. Westfield has an arrangement with the city university for faculty development. You could attend part-time while continuing to teach here." Mia sat very still, absorbing this news. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to decide immediately," Eleanor assured her. "The funding will be available whenever you're ready." She hesitated, then added more personally, "Though I hope you'll consider it. The academic director at the university is an old friend. He was quite impressed by your faculty recital performance last month." That performance had been a turning point for Mia. After years away from the stage, she had played a mixed program of classical works and Chinese compositions before an audience of students, parents, and faculty. The standing ovation had lasted nearly 3 minutes. "I'll think about it," Mia promised. "Right now I'm focused on making the summer program successful." Eleanor nodded, understanding Mia's cautious approach to her own ambitions. Over the past months, she had come to respect how carefully Mia balanced her growing role at Westfield with her family responsibilities and online studies. "Speaking of success," Eleanor said, changing the subject, "Lee's audition for the youth symphony is next week. He's been practicing the Mozart concerto diligently." "I know," Mia replied with a smile. He cornered me after school yesterday to play through the cadenza one more time. His interpretation has improved dramatically under your guidance. Eleanor accepted the compliment with a nod. In truth, Lee's progress had been a collaborative effort. While Eleanor handled his formal lessons, Mia had been offering supplementary coaching that brought an added dimension to his playing. Instead of seeing this as interference, Eleanor had come to appreciate the balance their different teaching styles provided. He mentioned that you suggested adjusting the phrasing in the second movement, Eleanor said. I think it works rather well. Just a small change, Mia said modestly. You laid all the groundwork. Their mutual respect had developed gradually over the months, replacing the awkwardness of their early interactions. Each had found in the other a colleague who shared the same fundamental love of music, if sometimes different approaches to teaching it. As they left the classroom together, they passed the janitor's closet where Mia had once stored her cleaning supplies. She paused briefly, a reflective look crossing her face. Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed, she said quietly. This time last year I was mopping these same floors. Eleanor followed her gaze. And now your students track mud across them after recess. They both laughed, the shared humor erasing the last traces of their former hierarchical relationship. Life takes unexpected turns, Eleanor observed as they continued walking. When I first saw you at that piano, I never imagined we'd end up here. You told me to stick to mopping, Mia reminded her with a gentle smile that held no resentment. One of my less insightful moments, Eleanor acknowledged. Though in fairness, you were breaking the rules. Sometimes rules need to be reconsidered, Mia said thoughtfully. Not broken exactly, but expanded to include new possibilities. As they reached the main foyer, they found Dr. Liu waiting with a visitor, a distinguished-looking woman in her 60s whom Eleanor recognized as the director of the national piano competition. Ah, perfect timing, Dr. Liu called, waving them over. Ms. Lin, these are the colleagues I was telling you about. Eleanor Wright, our piano department head, and Mia Chen, who leads our community outreach program. Ms. Lin shook hands with both women. Dr. Liu speaks highly of your work here, she said, particularly your innovative approach to the community program. We're looking for regional adjudicators for our youth division, and diversity in teaching philosophy is something we value on our panels. Eleanor glanced at Mia, noting the surprise on her face. Adjudicating a national competition was a prestigious opportunity, one usually offered to established professors and performers. Both Ms. Chen and I would be honored to learn more about the opportunity, Eleanor said smoothly, including Mia in the conversation as an equal. Excellent, Ms. Lin replied. Perhaps we could discuss it over lunch? I'm particularly interested in hearing about your summer program for underserved students. We've been considering a scholarship initiative along similar lines. As they walked together toward the faculty dining room, Eleanor noticed a group of Mia's young students watching from the hallway, wide-eyed at seeing their teacher conversing with such important-looking visitors. Mia gave them a small wave and a reassuring smile, never forgetting who her most important audience was. Later that afternoon, after Ms. Lin had departed with promises of future collaboration, Eleanor found Mia in one of the practice rooms, playing a piece Eleanor didn't immediately recognize, something with elements of traditional Chinese music blended with Western classical structure. Your own composition? Eleanor asked, entering the room. Mia nodded, her fingers continuing to move across the keys. Something I've been working on for the summer program. A piece that bridges different musical traditions, like my students will be doing. Eleanor listened, appreciating the seamless way Mia had integrated the pentatonic scales of Chinese folk music with classical harmonies. It's beautiful, she said when Mia finished. Have you written it down? Most of it, Mia replied. I'm still working on the middle section. You should perform it at the faculty showcase in June, Eleanor suggested, and perhaps submit it to the educational music publishers. There's a real need for multicultural teaching pieces. Mia looked thoughtful. Maybe I will. She closed the piano gently. Ms. Lin's offer was unexpected, but well-deserved, Eleanor said firmly. Your perspective would be valuable to the competition committee. A year ago, I was cleaning toilets in this building, Mia said, shaking her head slightly in disbelief. And now I'm being asked to judge a national competition. A year ago, I was telling talented musicians to stick to mopping floors, Eleanor countered with a self-deprecating smile. We've both learned some important lessons, I think. The two women shared a moment of understanding. Their journey together had transformed them both, Mia finding her way back to her musical calling, and Eleanor rediscovering the purpose and joy that had first drawn her to teaching. Outside the window, they could see the school grounds where children from Mia's Saturday class were playing, before being picked up by their parents. Among them was a small boy who had been too shy to speak during his first month of lessons. Now he was demonstrating hand positions to a younger child, his face animated with excitement as he shared what he had learned. "That," Mia said, nodding toward the window, "is why all of this matters." Eleanor followed her gaze, understanding perfectly. Beyond competitions and performances, beyond academic credentials and professional recognition, this was the heart of what they did, passing on the gift of music to the next generation, opening doors that might otherwise remain closed. "Indeed it is," she agreed, "and I'm grateful every day that you ignored my instructions to stick to mopping." Mia laughed, the sound as musical as her playing. "Sometimes," she said with a smile that held both wisdom and humor, "the most important lessons come from unexpected teachers." As the afternoon sun streamed through the practice room windows, casting golden light across the piano keys, both women recognized the truth of those words and the unexpected harmony they had found together.